Welcome to my overview of Daggerfall Unity, and let's see if this monolith of a game is worth playing. How can we enjoy the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall in the modern age? Let's give everyone a brief history, and then we will dive right into the discussion. The Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall was released in 1996 by Bethesda Game Studios, following up their first release, Arena, which, although not a mainstream success at the time, was successful enough to win awards and develop a dedicated cult following. The second installment to the series was even more ambitious than the first, with an in-game map that they claimed rivaled the land area of England. The second game also focused more on developing the factions and side content of the Elder Scrolls lore, such as the Fighters Guild, Mages Guild, Thieves Guild, and Dark Brotherhood, as well as nobles, merchants, and commoners of the various regions around the Iliac Bay, some of which would make appearances in later Elder Scrolls titles. It also offered a main quest that resulted in the possibility of having 6 different endings, something that no other Elder Scrolls game replicated in the future. Daggerfall was truly an incredibly ambitious project, and yet at the time the game was made, the technology the studio had to work with was relatively limited. This resulted in a vast open world that was relatively shallow due to the repetitive nature of the landscape, which was flat, as well as the cities and other points of interest, which began to look very similar as you engaged more and more with the content. Let us also not forget the numerous game-breaking bugs that were released with the game, causing many people who purchased it the inability to actually complete the game. Some of these problems would be fixed with patches, but back then, official patches had to be sent by mail on floppy disks, meaning customers had to wait a long time for these fixes. In fact, many of the bugs were never completely fixed, in true Bethesda fashion. For the longest time, I had played and completed every Elder Scrolls game except for Daggerfall. Why? Well, I got too frustrated by it. I remember spending 6 hours in a randomized dungeon looking for a giant that I needed to kill that wasn't there. Turns out that he probably was somewhere in the dungeon, but probably in an inaccessible area or stuck in a wall. Anyhow, for years I left Daggerfall untouched and incomplete. But fortunately for us, Daggerfall Unity was released. An open-source port of the game into a 3D engine created by a devoted Daggerfall fan. This port of the game fixed a lot of the game-breaking bugs and stabilized the game. It also allowed for more modern controls, making it more accessible to the common man than ever before. Unity also provided console commands, which allowed for players to be able to wiggle their way out of bugged quests. With the port came the development of several mods which helped to improve the visualization of Daggerfall, with 3D trees and more realistic looking terrain, giving the player a better incentive to explore the world. Mods like Beautiful Villages and the Wilderness Overhaul continued to flesh out the world, adding immersion for the player. The Dream mods improved a lot of the textures in the game, giving the whole experience a new coat of paint. With these also came a remaster of the soundtrack within Daggerfall to give it a more fuller, orchestral sound than the original. Basic roads and travel options allowed the player to use a vast network of roads to travel from town to town, city to city, and from dungeon to dungeon, offering an alternative way of traveling rather than the constant fast travel option. This allowed for the game to actually feel large and vast, and not just be large on pen and paper. To make things even more interesting, bandit, orc, and other monster camps, along with shrines and guard towers, were added to the Overworld with the World of Daggerfall mod, to give the player a reason to explore the world and not just hop around through loading screens. These are just some of the numerous mods that have helped Daggerfall to become more realized, yet we haven't even begun to talk about the numerous quests that can also be added to the game. Installing mods is usually really simple and easy in Daggerfall Unity. With most, you can simply download, drag, and drop in the mods folder under streaming assets. There is numerous information online on how to do this. The creators of Daggerfall back in 1996 had a very different vision from modern Bethesda, as they envisioned the Elder Scrolls as a medieval fantasy life simulator, rather than a sandbox adventure. No one player was supposed to necessarily have the same experience as another player, and often it was left up to the player themselves to create their own role-playing experience, rather than to be told how to have their role-playing experience. Thus, other than the main quest itself and one set of Fighters Guild quests, quests in Daggerfall were completely randomized. When you went to the Fighters Guild, the guild master would randomly give you a quest out of 20 different possible quests. Some of these quests would be near impossible to do as a low-level character, so oftentimes players were encouraged to turn down a quest until they were given one that was more appropriate with their level. Daggerfall Unity fixed this with a mod that provides a player with a list of all the quests they can do for each guild, and gives them the option to choose quests that they complete given their ability level. There was also a quest pack mod that added an additional 200 quests to the game, adding many more guild quests. There were also several mods that added more guilds to the game, such as the Archaeologist Guild, Bard's Guild, and the Red Lantern Guild, all complete with their own quests and guild ranking system. More random encounters were added to the game in the form of short quests or events that happened in the open world, allowing for even a greater sense of adventure when exploring the Iliac Bay. One of my favorite encounters are the bandit and knight skirmishes that every now and then trigger outside of homesteads, where you get to choose who to fight with and against. This always culminates in a bloody battle, where you try to whittle down the enemy and their forces until they retreat. You're often rewarded with a good amount of gold at the end, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. There are many mods that add random events like this to the game, such as Sigil Wilderness Encounters, Warm Ashes, and Basic and Advanced Wilderness Encounters. Let's also not forget to mention mods that add more packs of monsters, where you're no longer up against one or two mobs at a time, but often have to face an entire room of orcs, skeletons, or zombies. With all these additions to the game, the player is truly thrown into a world where they can create their own adventures in unlimited ways, similar to a tabletop experience. I really do believe this is what the original developers envisioned, but were hampered by the technology of the day. Unlike games that came afterwards, such as Oblivion and Skyrim, it is not really possible to join all the guilds in one playthrough of Daggerfall. Each guild has a reputation system that can oftentimes conflict with other guilds, meaning that in order to fully experience all guilds, you will have to do multiple playthroughs of different characters that are based around specific skills that guild is seeking after. Let's also not forget that there are other minor factions, such as vampire clans and witch covens. Yes, even as early as this game, you can become a vampire and a werewolf, and also a wereboar. Yes, a wereboar. You heard it. This brings us to the whole reputation system in Daggerfall, which is incredibly complicated compared to other games in the series. In Daggerfall, you have 3 major kingdoms alongside numerous minor kingdoms that make up the Iliac Bay, covering the southern region of High Rock and the northern region of Hammerfell on the continent of Tamriel. Completing quests in different regions will raise your reputation with the lord of that region, but could lower your reputation in other kingdoms depending on the quests that you complete. There are 2 types of guilds that I neglected to talk about earlier that I will explain now. These are the Temple and Knightly Orders. Many regions in Daggerfall have a specific knightly order that serves them or a deity that they follow. Joining a knightly order and doing quests for them not only helps to increase your reputation with them, but also with the regional government. Temples are similar, but have many allies and oftentimes an enemy, so completing a quest for them will improve your reputation with a lot of factions, but could affect your reputation with another temple. And since temples are usually specific to different regions, that means that people in an opposing deity's region may begin to dislike you over time. For example, the Temple of Archay is actively at odds with the House of Dibella. This means that it may be more difficult to get people to talk to you who live in the regions of the Dragontail Mountains, the Elysian Hills, Sentinel, or Shalgora, because of their patron god who actively opposes the worship of Dibella. This all culminates in a political system that is actually quite deep and complex. In Daggerfall, the world does not revolve around you like it does in Skyrim, where every faction bows before you after you complete 5 quests for them. Here, actions have consequences throughout the Iliac Bay. The kingdoms of the land will move on with or without your influence, whereas the later games, particularly Skyrim and Oblivion, handhold you and point you in the direction of each guild. In Daggerfall, you must seek these guilds out, and if you do not have the necessary skills, you cannot join. In Skyrim, I could easily go through the entire College of Winterhold using almost no magic, but in Daggerfall, this is not so. Some quests require that you have specific spells in your spellbook in order to complete the quest, and if your intelligence is not high enough, well, that's too bad. You've just failed the quest. This adds an element of realism and immersion that avoids the story trope that you are the chosen one, come to save the land from a dark threat. Let's talk briefly about character creation. Character creation is the most in-depth character creator within the entire Elder Scrolls series. As in all games in the Elder Scrolls series, you must choose your race. There are a lot of similarities here, such as Argonian, Khajiit, Redguard, etc. Except that you do not have the choice to choose Orc or Imperial. Orcs do play a big part in the story of Daggerfall, and lore-wise become more interwoven with the other races following the completion of the main quest. Obviously, given the age of the game, character appearance is fairly limited, where you are given a few face options from 2D sprites to choose from. Following this, the character creation allows for you to choose between several different classes, or customize your own class. While many people will tell you the only way to play Daggerfall is to always click Custom, I beg to differ. Daggerfall to me is not about playing the most optimal character, but choosing a specific character that you want to roleplay. There is, in fact, a mod called Classes Expanded, which gives you even a greater variety of classes to choose from. For my playthrough, I chose to go with a vanilla warrior build because That's often how I like to do a lot of my first-time playthroughs. You are then given a distribution of points where you are able to invest in the attributes of your character, such as your strength, intelligence, willpower, agility, endurance, personality, and luck. Strength affects your physical damage output and carry weight. Intelligence, your mana pool. Willpower, spell resistance. Agility, ability to hit and avoid being hit. Endurance, health pool and resistances to disease. Personality affects the way people react to you and your ability to increase skills related to personality. And luck, a powerful modifier to any action you take. There are no skills in which luck is the primary attribute, but your odds of succeeding in any skill trial is modified by your luck. For each level, you are given a random set of points, usually between 4 to 6, that you can use to higher your attribute levels. After modifying your attribute points, you must choose the skills you want to level, divided into 4 different subsets: primary skills, major skills, minor skills, and miscellaneous skills. The skills are all tied to the different attributes that you have, so it makes sense to level skills tied to attributes you want to level up. As a warrior, I decided to choose mainly combat skills to be my primary and major skills, such as longsword, axe, blunt weapons, archery, hand-to-hand combat, and short blade. For minor skills, I had a lot of background passives, such as swimming, running, jumping, and climbing, to name a few. There are a lot of skills to choose from in Daggerfall, including language skills, which can help you to pacify different enemies in the game, such as orcs, nymphs, giants, and Daedra. This is something that got watered down a lot as the Elder Scrolls series evolved, or should I say, devolved, over the years. Leveling is simple once you understand how things are calculated. You gain levels based on 15 skill level ups. These 15 skill level ups are the sum of your primary skills, 2 highest major skills, and highest minor skill. The exception is the first level up, where the number of skills you need to increase is only 2. You increase these levels either by using them regularly as you adventure in the world, or through different skill trainers stationed in various guild halls of the Iliac Bay, who can help raise your skills to a maximum of 50. There are no master skill trainers like there are in the follow-up games. Next, you can choose to start the game with a higher or lower reputation, with certain people liking you more than others by answering a series of questions or just filling out which groups of people you would prefer to be more friendly with or at odds with. With each positive reputation, you must allow for a more negative reputation. There are trade-offs to everything. This video is not a guide on how to min-max a character build, so I'm going to just kind of briefly go over this part. If you want to find a min-max build, there are plenty of other YouTube videos out there for you to follow. Next, let's go over a little bit on how the main quest plays out. I'm not going to give you any direct spoilers, but more or less show what to expect from the main quest, because there is a lot to talk about here.
Excuse the gloom, but none may know of this meeting. The nature of my trouble is darker still. Over a year ago, King Lysandus of Daggerfall died honorably on the field of battle. He was as loyal a subject, ally, and friend as you are. I did grieve for him, but his spirit does not rest. With a spectral army, he haunts his former kingdom, crying for revenge. I do not know why a good and loyal man would be so cursed. Perhaps you can find the answer and close the marble jaws of oblivion, bringing peace to his soul. I ask this as your emperor and your friend. I have one lesser request. Several years ago, I wrote a letter to the Queen of Daggerfall. It never arrived. The letter was of a sentimental and personal nature. If you find and destroy that letter, I will be grateful. Now, my champion, rest well this night, for tomorrow you sail for the kingdom of Daggerfall.
Daggerfall begins with a private meeting between us, the agent, and Emperor Uriel Septim VII. He instructs us to travel to the Daggerfall region of High Rock to investigate mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of King Lysandus. Lysandus was loyal to the Emperor, as was his wife, the former Queen, Minisera. However, his death has complicated the always troublesome political situation in the Iliac Bay. Now, Lysandus' ghost haunts the city of Daggerfall, and our mission is to find out why. Additionally, the Emperor had once sent a letter of a sentimental and personal nature to Minisera. It never arrived, and he would greatly appreciate its recovery. However, our journey will be complicated by an item of power which all the major powers in the Iliac Bay are racing to get their hands on. In this journey, we will be forced to make many choices as to who will benefit from our deeds. A word of warning: the governments and factions of the Iliac Bay are not above sending assassins to deal with those they have quarrels with, so we must choose our affiliations well. To be brief, the 6 groups we will be dealing with in the main quests are the nobility of the kingdoms of Daggerfall, Wayrest, and Sentinel, along with Gortwog of Orsinium, the King of Worms and his vile necromancers, and the enigmatic Underking. How you treat these leaders will shape the ending of the main quest. This is one of the reasons Daggerfall allows for such open roleplay. Some modern players might not like this, but it allows for a level of replayability that is unrivaled in the series. You can choose to be loyal to the Emperor, but maybe you decide to join the Order of the Candle and feel a certain Red Guard patriotism toward Queen Akorithi and the Kingdom of Sentinel. Maybe you decide to play as an evil mage who works with the Dark Brotherhood. Perhaps your roleplay of choice might be the King of Worms or the Underking. This is where I circle back to the fact that you can't do everything in this game on one character, and it takes multiple playthroughs to experience all of the content to its fullest. The main quest of Daggerfall does not play linearly. Rather, everything is relatively disconnected at first, where quests branch outward before they branch inward, with some main quests being entirely optional, while others are necessary for progressing to the next quest. These main quests typically are bestowed upon you through couriers who send you letters from the various kingdoms across the Iliac Bay. Some of them offer you a time limit before you must begin them, while others allow you to adventure around at your own pace before traveling to set location to start them. It is usually pretty clear which quests are time-gated and which ones are not as you journey through Hammerfell and High Rock. On the unofficial Elder Scrolls page's website, you are given a flow chart showing you which quests are optional and which quests are required. However, I really recommend that you finish the Painting the Truth in Ancient Water quests, as completing them will reveal the Tomb of Lysandus, which is important in progressing the main quest quickly. You can technically find the tomb without completing these quests like I had to do, but it was a bit immersion-breaking as I had to look up a guide on how to find it and travel there by horse without any plot thread to point me there. Overall, I liked how the main quest was set up, yet be prepared to get lost in the dungeons. There were a lot of points during the dungeons where I had to look up guides on how to progress further, as many of the dungeons are absolutely massive and represent a large ball of spaghetti with numerous passageways leading to nowhere and secret doors that are only shown on your minimap and are not immediately visible while you are exploring. And this is a Unity update. In the original game, you always had to press yourself against all the dungeon walls, checking for secret invisible doors, which is more frustrating than fun, if you ask me. Lastly, there is some very archaic puzzle design, which can lead to hours of wasted wandering around tunnels and getting lost. I'm specifically thinking of the skull you need to interact with to open a portal in the Tomb of Lysandus. Never before had you ever had to interact with the numerous skulls scattered around the dungeons of Daggerfall, but for this one, you do. You just do. There is also a lever elevator puzzle which can be really frustrating, where you have to go put down a lich in the quest, Soul of a Lich. You have to interact with multiple levers around the dungeon to unlock all the barriers to this door to go find the lich you need to kill. While I knew it was possible for me to solve it with a lot of trial and error, my impatience prompted me to look up a walkthrough for it, as the amount of backtracking became quite painful after a while. Also, speaking of backtracking, do yourself a favor and make sure you download the Archaeologist mod, which allows stores to sell you potions of teleport. This allows you to set an anchor at the start of a dungeon and teleport back to it once you've completed your objectives within the set dungeon. This will save you hours of backtracking unless you happen to have the spell of recall on you. Just do it. You'll thank me later. Now let's talk a little bit about the other dungeons in Daggerfall. There are literally thousands of dungeons to explore that are vast and can often take up long swaths of gaming time. These dungeons often connect with guild quests, so if you fail to find the objective, you risk losing reputation with your guild. I recommend starting your first playthrough using the smaller dungeons option. It allows you to get used to how the dungeons work in Daggerfall without overwhelming you with hours of feeling lost and risking yourself for being underprepared. Having an abundance of spells or potions, if you are a non-magic character, are essential to survival in these vast labyrinths of danger. As you become higher level, you will encounter a lot of enemies such as vampires and liches, who can often paralyze you, which is in most cases a slow and painful death. Making sure you are stocked up on heal potions and potions of free action are going to be essential to getting you out of a lot of messy situations. Let's also not forget potions of cure disease and potions of cure poison. Diseases in this game can be particularly nasty, and if you are stuck deep in a dungeon, you may risk losing hours of gameplay if you don't have some meds with you. The best way that I found to get potions was through leveling up through a temple faction. With the exception of Julianos and Kinnereth, they don't sell potions, so maybe stay away from them on your first playthrough. Let's now discuss a little bit more about the Overworld and what we expect to see in cities and towns. When you go to your map, you will be shown all the different kingdoms and regions of the Iliac Bay. Each region has a capital city, alongside other large cities. Now, unlike in later titles, these cities are actually quite big and can take some time to navigate through. Most also have city walls which close at nighttime, so arriving in one of these towns recklessly will make you have to wait until dawn and hope that varieties of critters won't attack you while you try to rest outside the city. These cities contain various types of buildings. There is typically always a palace where all the nobles reside. Secondly, there are the blue buildings, as they appear on the map, which represent buildings that belong to guilds. Next, there are orange buildings, which represent different shops, from general stores to alchemists to bookstores, armor shops, weapon shops, pawn shops, as well as banks. Each store specializes in different things. Most are self-explanatory, with the pawn shops giving a better bang for your buck if you have goods to sell other than alchemy ingredients. Banks are a great way to trade your coins, which can take up a lot of weight in your inventory, for letters of credit, which are much lighter to carry. You can also use banks to deposit the money or take out loans if you are broke. Just be forewarned that you may have to avoid that region should you fail to pay back your debt, as the law may come after you. As well as cities, there are also towns and villages which operate similar to cities but often contain less services and don't have any palaces. Additionally, you can come across shrines to local deities and hamlets built up around temples to one of the 8 divines of Tamriel. This is of course before Talos was introduced to the lore as the 9th divine. Lastly, we have dungeons. At the start of the game, you will only see locations of grave site crypts, which are very quick to complete and short, containing only a few enemies at best. As you continue to adventure and kill enemies and complete quests, you will occasionally come across maps that will reveal more dungeons on the map, which are much larger, so you can delve into them at your own peril. Also a reminder that with the use of the basic roads mod and travel options mod, you can travel in between these cities without having to always resort to the fast travel option. Just stick to the roads. I feel like if you go through the game without a backstory or idea how you want to roleplay your character, the game can become quite a slog as you wait days upon days to get letters that guide you through the main quest. Developing a life or story outside of the main quest really helps the game to come to life and get you excited for what kind of backstory you are going to develop with the next character. Maybe it will be a Tomb Raider who spends most of his time looting dungeons and taking up thievery for the Thieves Guild, or maybe the character decides to take a more good or neutral path and join the Archaeologist Guild instead. There are numerous possibilities to play around with, and that's why I think this game can often be way more replayable than other games within the series. I will say this about Daggerfall, and even the Unity port. The first time playing through this game is going to be the most difficult playthrough. Like games of its time, such as Baldur's Gate and the first Diablo game, you can't expect to go into a dungeon without being fully prepared. You will realize this soon enough. Also, as I stated a little bit earlier, some of the main quest dungeons can be downright confusing, and don't be afraid to use some walkthroughs when you need to use them. This game came out in the era where game manuals were a thing, so don't be afraid to use the wiki as your game manual. You will most certainly need it to get past some of the riddles, unless you are a complete masochist or you really enjoy reading comprehension. There were times where even the console command was necessary, as one time I locked myself in a dungeon area with no visible way of getting out. But on the contrary, I would also encourage the player to let things happen to them while they are playing the game. Save scum when necessary, but at other times let things turn out how they randomly turned out, similar to what you might expect when playing tabletop games and D&D. It's all part of the fun sometimes, and it can lead to further developing your character's backstory. This is not a min-max kind of game. If you look at it more from the tabletop perspective, you will have more fun. If you use your imagination, you will have more fun. So do I think Daggerfall Unity is worth giving it a try in 2024 and beyond? Absolutely. And there are always new mods being put up on the Nexus platform. I always get excited about what new mods will be introduced to the game, which continues to actively flesh out this amazing fantasy medieval life simulator. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Comment, like, and subscribe. Cheers.